what is your step-by-step process? What actually goes into this? My thought process was, okay, so you get picked and then you get pregnant and then you have a baby. So we're talking a year, like so even just the application process, it was the most intense job application I've ever filled out.
Well, good morning. We have Sarah joining us today, and Sarah has been a surrogate herself and kindly offered to share her story, her journey on, being a gestational carrier, what that was like, why she did it, and kind of the challenges that came along with it, and some lessons and blessings that came out of it. So introduce yourself for everyone.
Yes, hi, I am Sarah. As you mentioned, I was a surrogate a couple years ago. I work in a law firm. I'm a manager there, and I have 3 children of my own, all preteens and teens. So we're a busy household.
I can imagine. I can imagine. Yeah. So I know a little bit of your story. So for other people who do not, so kind of walk us through, like, what made you interested in being a surrogate? Is it something that you always thought about, or what?
Yeah, it definitely was not something I had always thought about. I grew up very, very right-wing conservative Christian households, very man and a woman. Even infertility issues in heterosexual relationships was not something that was ever really discussed. I didn't have a wide range of that. My parents are very blessed and never had issues, had 4 children. I had my children in my first marriage, heterosexual marriage, and we had never had problems. It was a very, oh, we want to have a kid? Sure, get off birth control and we're pregnant a month later. And it was something I just, as I grew older, that relationship ended. I kind of came into my own, realized, oh, that's why I never connected with my husband. I'm actually very much a lesbian. I like women. This is a thing that happens. And it was like this whole new world kind of opened up of like, oh, there's plenty of people out there that are just not nearly as blessed or as fortunate to have such an easy experience. And I didn't have complications in my pregnancies. They were very by the book, standard vaginal deliveries, super easy peasy. Getting into a relationship with, my girlfriend was very much, if we decided to have children, how would that look and what would we want to do? And kind of just feeling and learning and growing and feeling incredibly fortunate and blessed to have had my children and had them as easily as I did. Kind of opened that door to wanting to pass that along and knowing if I ever decided to have another child, I would need help. And being able to kind of continue that, karma or whatever you want to call it. And that's why I ultimately looked into just doing an egg donation. I thought that would be kind of a first step, a little less involved. As I had mentioned to you earlier, they told me I was 27, 28 at the time when I looked into it, and they told me their cutoff is 30. And by the time I finished all of the beginning paperwork and doctor's appointments, and you have to do psych evaluations, they said by the time you get to that and your portfolio is actually ready to be viewed by parents, chances are you're not going to get selected just because you're getting close to the 30-year-old cutoff date, which is, it really is. And they had looked at my background and my medical paperwork and everything that I sent in. And that's when they mentioned the surrogacy, that surrogacy goes through 40, some places do 45, that I had plenty of time and plenty of years and would be a great candidate for that. Which is funny because ultimately when I got further in the surrogacy journey, they put you on medication to help your uterus prepare for a transfer, and my body did not like it, and it didn't respond, and it didn't do anything. And they were like, we'll just take you off all the medicine and see what your body does. And that worked perfectly. And I'm like, see,
so
my eggs are not that old. They probably could have taken them.
You're like, my body's good. Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah,
Okay,
I mean, very lucky here.
Yeah, no, it's very, very fortunate. And it's so interesting because
Mhm.
you got to see, you now have gotten to see the other side of,
Mhm.
hey, a lot of people need support when it comes to
Yeah,
having a family, even, even heterosexual couples, but,
yeah.
especially those in the LGBTQIA community that need that
Mhm.
extra help. So that's amazing that you
Yeah.
did that. Okay, so you're too old for the egg donation, which is just so
Yes.
funny. And so they were like, hey, maybe you should be a surrogate. So that's like
Yep.
a big leap.
Mhm.
So
It definitely is.
how did that work for you?
It definitely was a big leap. I took a good 6 months or so where I didn't commit to it. I didn't move down that road. I did a lot of research, which, as I'm sure you're aware, there's not a lot out there. Story wise, there's a lot of more fluffy pieces, but I didn't find a lot of like, what is your step by step process? What actually goes into this? Again, as someone who had never kind of been down the infertility or, treatment, my thought process was, okay, so you get picked and then you get pregnant and then you have a baby. So we're talking a year, like you don't realize, even just the application process. It was the most intense job application I've ever filled out. They wanted my family's history, medical history. I had to do, I don't remember what the test was called, but it's that like 600 psych evaluation question. My partner had to take it. We had to speak to a psychologist. There was 4 or 5 months of just prep work before we were even approved to start looking at getting matched with families. And just that kind of prep stuff was stuff I wasn't fully prepared for it to be as involved. Tracking down my children's birth records and everything from the hospitals is something that they require as well. You look into insurance. A lot of insurances these days apparently put in a surrogacy clause stating that they have maternity coverage, but if you're a surrogate, it doesn't count. So happy to get an explanation of benefits. My agency, I did work with an agency. They were really great. She jumped on a call with me with my insurance to fully verify they don't have that clause, which helps a lot with the parents if they don't have to mess with getting insurance and they can just use yours. That makes you kind of a more shiny surrogate because it just kind of takes that step out for them that they don't have to worry about getting that separate coverage. So I did a lot of research and a lot of kind of soul searching. Was this something I felt like I could do at the time? And still, I'm pretty happy with 3 kids. I don't think I want to have any more. I didn't want any more. I think for me, that was one of the main deciding factors was I don't think I'm going to want to keep the baby or maybe struggle. I'm sure to a certain extent I will struggle with that. Obviously, 9 months and it's there, but I thought that might be, knowing that my journey and my family is complete, it honestly felt a lot more like babysitting. It felt like I just knew from day one the baby wasn't mine. He, whatever, they didn't want to find out. So we were surprised at birth, but knowing that kind of helped, knowing that my journey was over. I don't think I would suggest a surrogacy for someone who is still wanting more children of their own, because it just like like I said, mine was 2.5 years, I think, complete journey from starting paperwork. And again, I was super, super lucky. We only did one egg transfer one time and I got pregnant. And so I can only imagine if, the contract that I signed stated that we would do up to 4 transfers. So had we had to do, 2 or 3 or 4 transfers and spread them out, that would have only, elongated the process by, another 9 months or so. So it's definitely involved to do all of that. So if you want your own kids still, I think that would make it a lot harder to be that invested in something.
Right. Yeah. No, that's That's a lot. You're, I mean, very, very blessed and very, very fortunate, and a lot of, and the intended
Yes.
parents too. Like, thank God, you know,
Yeah.
people don't come to surrogacy because it's their first choice. It's
Right.
it's not, but so thank goodness for that. Okay, so you worked with an agency, and I know that you shared with me that
Mhm.
you were like, I have no idea what I was doing. I would not want to do it on my own.
Yes.
Because people there is an independent route where people, they don't work with an
Mhm.
agency. It saves the intended parents a lot of money, a lot of fees, but
Yes.
there's so much involved and there's so much that goes into it. And you
Mhm.
even shared with me that the like contract was like 63 pages that
Mhm.
the lawyer drafted up for you. And it's like,
Yeah.
whoa. To be able to
Yeah.
have somebody else on your team, on your support, like
Mhm.
supporting you is like, you know, not that one is better than the other or whatever, but it's like, if you're not if you're not comfortable or experienced or whatever, that an
Mhm.
agency route may be better for being a caregiver.
Yeah. And I'm definitely an anxiety, OCD kind of person. So knowing that I had that backup and all of the T's were crossed and I's were dotted and all of that. And again, you can do all the research in the world. And I knew there was going to be typical pregnancy things, dietary restrictions, maybe workout restrictions. Um, but the contract would drill down even into like what happens if the intended parents divorce, what happens with the child, or what happens if the intended parents unexpectedly pass away. The contract sets all of that up, and I don't know if on my own if that's something I would have ever considered to even think about. They go down to medical stuff. What decisions are mine to make for me and my body, and what decisions are the parents, and um, what happens if I'm incapacitated. What does my living will kick in? Does the baby's living will kick in? All of those sorts of things are drilled down and are in the contract, which were important conversations to have with me and my girlfriend. I'd had to ask her, you're the one that's going to have to look at me if I'm, it ultimately stated that if the baby was viable, that I would be left on any life-saving measures possible, which is contrary to what my living will specifically states. And she was like, well, I don't know. And I said, well, it's not if I'm out, I'm out. Like, it's going to be, you're the one that's going to have to maybe hold on for 2 or 3 months and not be able to, mourn me or move on. If the baby's viable, you're going to have to be the one that really carries that load and carries that burden. So your partner is also very involved in the process and does the psych evaluations and all of that.
That's intense.
It goes from that very heavy stuff to the more comical. The intended parents were a little bit older. They've been trying for 25 years for a child, and so there was a lot of kind of comically almost outdated things that they put in the contract. I couldn't dye my hair. There was just random funny things in there, and it mentions crazy things like I couldn't go skydiving. And I was like, oh, darn. Like, I really felt like I was going to do that at 6 months. Like, so the contract was very wide range of things.
That's so funny. Well,
Yeah.
regardless, every journey, there's going to be 2 separate attorneys, the intended parents
Yes.
and the surrogate. Like, it's so important to have separate attorneys because, as you said, like, there's so many things that go into it that you don't even think of, that you want to make sure that you have an advocate for you and somebody that's going to explain everything for you, because who thinks of these things? Like, you're just like, great, I'm going to carry your baby and it's going to be great. And after I give birth, I'm going to hand the baby to you and then I'm going to go home. But like,
exactly.
Because it's like these things you don't think about even for your own pregnancy. Like, my wife and I didn't talk about like, hey, what happens if I'm 6 months pregnant and have to go on a ventilator? We never talked about this,
Right. I don't think I ever did on mine either.
Yeah, which is just, it makes sense because it's not in this, it's like our family, our baby, and this is not your baby.
Exactly.
So it's so interesting. So what are some of the things that you wish you would have known before
I
getting
think
started?
I think the timeline for sure. Again, just kind of thinking in my not educated self that I was just going to get pregnant and have a baby, and we're talking 9 months to a year, and everything's going to be great. I think knowing kind of more about the timeline, just realizing there's going to be 6 months worth of prep up front. There's going to be, I mean, there was another 6 months where we communicated with a couple of different intended parents. One was international, so it was, how do you feel about that? Do you want to work with international parents? And then another was a couple in a different state, and we didn't match with that couple ultimately because we had differences on when we would terminate the pregnancy. So that process took longer than I thought. And then once you do match with the couple, it didn't take too long. There was an initial meeting. We did their fertility clinic was my upfront work. I was able to choose my own doctor where I am and do the actual pregnancy and labor and delivery here. But the initial, some of the ultrasounds and blood work was actually at their clinic. So I had to fly a couple times cross country. So just knowing that it's already a big commitment, but knowing kind of that extra dose that it was going to be that much of a big commitment. And then again, they give options as far as what do you want to do with the breast milk? Do you want to pump and ship it? Do you want to not, sign on to do that? So that adds another, I went ahead and signed on to do that. I had struggles breastfeeding, but I'd never had struggles pumping. So I thought I might as well try. But I've gone this far for a year and some odd in, I might as well go the extra, 2 or 3 months. And, but it definitely was a lot more involved than I ever even could have imagined. So I would have liked to probably know that up front. And then I probably would have liked to do my own research on an attorney. They helped me find one in my area. But we didn't click very well. I didn't think she understood some of my concerns and some of my wording. I kind of felt like I was advocating for myself and telling her, no, I want you to tell them on this page, on this paragraph, I want this verbiage changed to something more generalized. And just kind of maybe having my own attorney and feeling more protected in that way. For me personally, I think I would have felt a little more comfortable.
Yeah, it's such a specialized, niched area of law.
Yeah.
That like just a general overarching family attorney may handle some cases, but there are literally attorneys that only do this, that only do family building, surrogacy, and that's, part of what my organization is set out to do is to finding those specific lawyers that specialize in family building, and then especially for the gay and queer community specifically. But I've just heard horror stories, not necessarily in surrogacy, but in general of family lawyers who saying, oh yeah, I can help with that, but they don't have the experience that come down to these nuanced things of these 63-page contracts that they need to know every bullet point that goes in. And you want somebody that's going to be able to help you navigate all of that, because that's a lot. And you don't know what you're reading. Like you said, you were like, I kind of had to go through it myself. And you're like, you don't know what you don't know what you're reading.
Exactly. And there's specific non-disclosures. You can discuss it in general, but names can't be released or this can't be released. And it's making sure, at the end of the day, it's a legally binding contract with clauses for what happens if it's breached, and the consequences of that. And there is money involved, so there's tax consequences and all kinds of things that it's not, like you said, it's not a normal everyday. And I'm like, the last thing I want to do is go through all of this and end up in court or, owing the IRS or something crazy that just kind of taints the experience.
Yeah. That's a lot. And you just want to do something good for a family, so you should have the support team around you that knows what each little specialized piece of it,
Yeah.
should be there to help and support you. But anyways, that it all worked out. Do you
Yes,
keep in
it
touch?
did.
Do you keep in touch with the family?
Yes. We kind of left it open-ended. Again, it goes into the contract. We discussed up front the actual birth, kind of what I would have wanted, anticipated, if the family was going to be allowed in the room with me, who's going to cut the cord, all of those things. And then spells out after that the communication. So there was a 3-month, 6-month, 9-month, and 12-month update that they were required to send. So we're past that point. I got my, grace period for having a newborn. I got my 1-year update a couple of months late, but I got it just this past December. And they were very, we're open to continuing, communication and hearing from you. So I don't think it's for us in the way that we felt about it. We didn't want to necessarily be super close. I actually really enjoy that they're in a different state. I'm not going to awkwardly run into them at the store. Kind of,
Yeah.
I'm part of their story and they're part of mine, but I want them to have their own family and their own story. And I didn't want to just insert myself and be like, no, I'm here forever. Like, I'm Aunt Sarah for the rest of your life. Like, I wanted them to have their more normalcy at that point. You have your baby, and I wanted them to be able to have that experience. So I enjoy that they're actually not in the same state. Small enough here where I live that we probably would run into each other at Target or whatever. So it's kind of nice to know that's not going to happen. But I can honestly think we'd probably send 6-month, 1-year updates. Maybe ultimately it'll just turn into yearly Christmas cards or something. But there is some communication there, which is nice, and kind of getting to see that first year of growing up and cake smashing and all the things that you do in that first year. It's fun to kind of see them get to experience that after watching. For me, the most rewarding was just the parents in general. They came down to the anatomy scan and them crying over this anatomy scan. It was just, I was like, okay, I remember why I'm doing all of this struggle, and knowing their experience. And she had tried everything, all the things. She was like, I'll help you with all the needles, like I'll give you all the hints, I've got it down, I've taken so many. And I'm like, okay, good, because I'm terrified of needles, so any tips that you have is really helpful. So just seeing them and knowing that they were finally going to have something that they've longed for again 25 years, I can't imagine.
It's insane.
Yeah, it is. And yes, there are a lot of needles. If anyone is curious about that, there's a lot. Even with a very easy one-time transfer, there was a lot. Yeah.
I've been there.
Yeah.
It's worth it. It's worth every single. Well, that's amazing. I mean, what you did is such a beautiful gift to a family. And I don't know that I personally could do it. I did not enjoy pregnancy very much. I was so sick both times. And I think about, wow, like for me, obviously it was like worth it. I'm like, okay, this is for my baby, my family, like, but to think about then having to, at the end, just go home empty handed. I mean, obviously that's what you do. That is, it's not my baby, but just like, wow.
It is big.
People that do that, it's incredible. And yeah. Whew. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, your journey. It's really, really incredible. And we're glad to hear, and especially for the family, like what an incredible blessing.
Yeah, it really, honestly, it makes it all worth it, just seeing them and their reactions, and their parents and their extended family. And they, the dad was, again, a little bit older, so very, maybe not the most affectionate, just with me especially. We don't know each other very well, especially when you live cross country. We've only met like 4 times. So it was, but they came to our house after when they were about to leave, because they had to deal with birth certificate things and, that aspect of it to make sure the mom's name was actually on it and not mine. And they came to say goodbye, and they sat there and fed the baby, and he kind of hugged me at the end and was in tears, and, and he was like, thank you. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was like, okay, this is why. And, again, I was very lucky. I didn't get sick or anything like that. So, it was a lot harder. It was a lot more tired having my 3 kids and being older. And I was like, ooh, this is, having mine at 20 something is a lot different, but just being able to kind of see them and know that, it's probably one of the greatest things I'll ever do in my life ever, is knowing that there's a family out there that is a family because I was able to actually do that. And so it's definitely something I'm proud of, and, will always kind of carry as my little badge of honor that I was able to actually do it and accomplish it. And, even though I didn't want more kids and it never really felt like my child, it didn't mean it wasn't difficult to still birth a child. And the baby came 3 weeks early, which none of my children did. Never had my water break or anything. I always had to be induced. And so this child was like, no, it's time. I'm here. And so kind of threw off all of our birth plans, as they like to do. And so they didn't actually make it for the actual birth, which was a little disappointing for them, but also changed a lot of the things. My girlfriend cut the cord, and, I took the baby skin to skin instead of going to the mom. And that kind of adds, a lot of that bonding, specialized moment. But again, it goes back to, well, I'm going to do what's best for the baby. The hospital's great. They offered, we can just take the child to, the nursery or do those kinds of things. And I was like, no, I can't. After this long, and, the baby's been with me and they know my heartbeat and my sound, I'm like, no, they need to come. But it definitely adds an extra emotional layer that, I think, especially if you're considering it, I think that's something you have to kind of be really extra prepared for. So there are kind of some of those things, and we all know babies come on their own time, how they want to, and don't just follow our plans. So kind of being ready for some of those shifts, it's definitely one of those things I look back on and think like, okay, I did that. I'm cool. Like, I'm kind of a badass. Yeah.
You are.
So
you are.
It was an awesome experience for sure.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you for sharing.
Of course.
All right.
Yeah.
We will talk soon.
Awesome. Have a great day.